Why was everyone silent when she walked into the room? The briefing table was full, maps spread across steel, radios hissing in the corner, coffee cups gone cold. And yet when she stepped inside, the air shifted, like dust hanging just before a storm. No one said a word, not the sergeant flipping through notes, not the lieutenant tapping his pen, not even the private who had been cracking jokes a moment ago. She carried her helmet under her arm. Her boots echoed against the concrete floor, each step measured, controlled. She had practiced that walk because in places like this, confidence was armor. But she could still feel it. Their eyes, the doubt that clung to her uniform as if it didn't belong. She sat straight-backed, silent, and when the commander finally spoke, his words cut the room like a blade. Sniper Overwatch, North Ridge. Corporal Reyes will take the position. For a moment, no one looked at her, until they did. A flicker of something, smirk, doubt, dismissal, passed across one soldier's face. The kind that said not her, not the quiet woman sitting at the edge of the table. But she said nothing. She only adjusted her grip on the helmet, the leather of her gloves creaking. Because silence was its own kind of defiance. Hours later, the desert stretched out like a broken sea. Heat shimmered, sand clung to everything, and the convoy moved slow, dust trailing behind armored vehicles like ghosts refusing to settle. She rode in the back of one, rifle laid across her lap, scope capped, the weight of it familiar, a part of her body now. The hum of the engine rattled through her boots, the smell of oil, sweat, metal burned into memory. She closed her eyes just for a moment, not to rest but to listen. Every sound mattered, a rattle too loose, a pause too long, the small shifts of the men seated near her trying not to stare. When one finally did, he couldn't help himself. "You sure you're cut out for this?" he muttered, his voice low but not low enough. The others smirked, looked away, pretended not to hear. Her eyes opened, cold, steady. She didn't answer. Because what could she say? That she had carried a dying friend across 3 kilometers of open terrain, bullets snapping the air around her like wasps. That she had stood in rain-soaked ruins, holding her rifle steady while her heart threatened to give out. That every scar under her uniform was a ledger of survival. Words wouldn't change him, action would. And action had a way of coming, whether they were ready or not. The ridge loomed in the distance. Rocks jagged against a white-hot sky. Their convoy slowed, halting near the base. Dust settled on their uniforms, turning them all the same shade of gray. She slung her rifle across her back, adjusted her pack, began the climb without waiting for orders, boots grinding into sand and stone, each step pulling her higher, away from the noise, toward the silence where her work lived. She preferred it that way, the higher ground, the stillness. By the time she reached the outcrop, sweat had soaked the collar of her shirt. She lowered herself flat against the rock, unzipped her pack, assembled her rifle with deliberate care, every piece fitting like bones snapping into place. The scope caught the world in its glass. Through it, the convoy below shrank into miniature machines. Soldiers packing, weapons slung, radios crackling, a perimeter forming. And just beyond, the village. Mud walls, corrugated roofs, silent now, too silent. She adjusted her breathing, slow, measured, in, out, her heartbeat the only rhythm she trusted. Then she saw him. The same soldier from the convoy, the one who had questioned her. He was laughing at something another man said, head tilted, grin easy. But then he looked up toward the ridge, toward her. Their eyes didn't meet, the scope didn't allow for that, but she saw the way his smirk faded, the way he shifted, the way doubt gave way to something else. Respect maybe, or fear, the line was thin. She didn't care which. Night crept fast. The desert changed with it. Heat bled away, leaving only cold air and sharper edges. The stars spilled like shattered glass across the sky. She stayed prone, wrapped in stillness, listening, waiting. Her world shrank to the rifle, the glass, the faint rustle of wind, the small ache building in her shoulders. And then movement. Two shadows near the edge of the village. Too careful, too slow, not the casual rhythm of civilians. Her breath caught, held, she steadied, finger hovering near the trigger. Through the scope, one shadow raised something metallic. She adjusted focus. An antenna, radio. Her chest tightened, signal coordinates. Her voice crackled through the radio clipped to her vest. Low, controlled. Movement, 2 men, north side of the village, possible spotters. The response came static-laced. Copy, hold. She held, muscles burning, time slowing. One of the men glanced toward the ridge, toward her. He couldn't see her, couldn't know, but it felt like he did. Her heartbeat thudded in her ears. Confirm, her radio asked. She whispered, confirmed. A pause too long, her jaw tightened. Then take it. Her breath emptied, her finger moved. The shot cracked the night open. One shadow folded, the other bolted. Her rifle barked again, silence returned. But not the same silence, never the same after. Below, soldiers scrambled, orders shouted, lights flaring, engines rumbling alive. She stayed still, watching, waiting, because one shot was never the end, it was always the beginning. And sure enough, figures appeared along the rooftops of the village. Not civilians, rifles catching moonlight. Ambush. Her throat tightened. She called it in rapid, clipped. Multiple hostiles, rooftops, south quadrant, possible RPGs. The radio exploded with voices, confusion, orders tangled. And in the chaos, she saw it. One hostile crouched with a launcher, sight aimed at the convoy, at the very vehicle where the soldier who had doubted her now sat. She didn't think, didn't breathe. The rifle cracked again. The hostile collapsed. The launcher clattered harmlessly away. And in that moment she felt it, not triumph, not pride, something quieter, heavier, the weight of knowing she had just decided who lived and who didn't. She blinked hard, cleared her throat, adjusted her scope. No time for feelings, not yet. By dawn, smoke smeared the horizon. The village still stood, but silence lingered heavier than any victory. The convoy rolled out, battered but intact, soldiers weary, eyes hollow. She descended the ridge, rifle slung once more, boots sinking into sand, muscles trembling from the long night. When she reached the vehicles, no one spoke at first. They just looked, brief glances, quiet acknowledgments. And then the soldier, the one who had questioned her. He stood near the tailgate, helmet under his arm. His eyes met hers. No smirk now, no dismissal. Only something else. He didn't thank her, he didn't apologize. He just nodded. And somehow that was enough. But as she climbed into the vehicle, her hands tightening on the rifle, she knew the war wasn't done with her. Not by a long stretch. Because there was something she hadn't told them, not yet. Something that made every mission personal. And sooner or later it would surface. Like it always did. Why did her hands still shake when no one was watching? The convoy rumbled back across the desert, dust clawing at the air, engines droning low. Soldiers leaned silent against steel walls, helmets tipped forward, eyes hollow. Some tried to rest, but rest didn't come easy after a night like that. She sat in the corner, rifle cradled across her lap, her gloved fingers still pressing against the cool barrel as if she could steady herself through the weight of it. No one spoke to her. No one dared. Only the soldier across from her, the same one who had questioned her before. His gaze flickered her way, uncertain, maybe guilty, but he said nothing. She didn't want words anyway. Words never stopped the trembling. Her eyes drifted to the desert beyond the small, grated window, pale sun breaking the horizon, light spilling across endless sand, cold air already giving way to heat. She watched it in silence, steadying her breathing, forcing her heartbeat into rhythm. She'd been here before, Not in this desert, not on this mission, but in this silence, the silence that came after death. And every time it pulled her back. A hospital room, white walls, the smell of antiseptic and iron, machines beeping in uneven rhythm. Her brother's voice thin, rasping. "You don't have to do this, Lena. You've already given enough." She had held his hand then, her thumb brushing across the jagged scar that ran along his knuckles. He was younger, always reckless, always chasing trouble as if danger was just another sport. And yet it was she who had chosen the uniform, not him. But war didn't care about choices. War took who it wanted. He had been caught in an ambush. Wrong place, wrong patrol, wrong second of fate. The medics had saved him barely. But the damage ran deeper than the scars. She remembered his eyes that day, tired, angry, helpless. And she remembered her promise. "I'll carry it for both of us now," she whispered. His jaw tightened. He wanted to argue, but his strength failed before his words could. The machines beeped on, cold, unforgiving. The memory burned as the convoy rolled on. She blinked hard, forcing herself back into the present. The desert, the heat, the men sitting with her, the mission not yet over. She flexed her hands, willing the tremor to fade, but it didn't, not completely. And then sudden noise. The convoy halted, brakes screeching. Soldiers straightened, weapons snapping into their grip. The radio on the dash crackled. Possible obstruction ahead, all units hold. Tension rippled through the vehicle, boots shifted, fingers tapped against triggers. She reached for her scope, detached it from the rifle, pressed it to her eye. Through the small window, she scanned the road ahead. There, a vehicle, burned out, abandoned in the middle of the track, its metal skeleton blackened, twisted. Too obvious, too placed. Her stomach tightened. The radio voice again, "Clearing team, advance." Two soldiers moved forward, careful, rifles raised. The others held breath. The silence stretched, brittle. And then, an explosion tore the morning apart. The lead vehicle vanished in fire. The ground shook. Shrapnel screamed against armor. Smoke bellowed skyward, thick, black, choking. Shouts, orders, chaos. Her rifle was already in her hands, scope snapping into place, heart pounding but her breathing steady, training wrapping itself around fear like armor. Through the glass she searched, high ground, shadows, windows of crumbling ruins to the left. Movement. There. A figure with a detonator clutched in his hand, half hidden behind rubble. She didn't hesitate. Her shot cut the chaos in half. The figure dropped. Another moved, another fell. The world narrowed again. Scope, breath, trigger, nothing else. Around her, soldiers shouted. Engines roared. The convoy lurched, trying to reverse, trying to reposition. Smoke clawed at the sky. And still she stayed locked, focused, each shot deliberate, each one carrying weight. Until the echoes faded. Until the ruins fell still. Until the only sound was fire crackling from the destroyed vehicle and the ragged breathing of men who knew how close it had been. Hours later, the convoy limped into the forward operating base. Gates opening slow. Guards watching with sharp eyes, weapons ready. The vehicles rolled inside, battered, blackened, carrying silence heavier than any cargo. They dismounted one by one, some limping, some clutching arms or ribs, some staring at the ground as if afraid to look up. She climbed down last, boots hitting the dirt with a dull thud, rifle still slung, helmet tucked under her arm. The air smelled of dust and diesel. The sun bore down heavy, relentless. She walked past the wreckage they had dragged back. The twisted remains of the lead vehicle, burned black, steel melted in unnatural curves. Her jaw tightened. She had seen this before too. Different road, different faces, same story. A captain approached, clipboard in hand, eyes scanning over the survivors. His gaze lingered on her, just a second longer than the others. Then he moved on. She let him. She didn't need recognition. Not from him, not from anyone. What she needed, what she wanted was harder, quieter. Something the uniform couldn't give. That night she sat alone near the edge of the camp, the stars above sharp, cold, the distant hum of generators filling the silence. She cradled her rifle, hands finally steady now. Funny how that worked. In the calm, they shook. In the storm, they didn't. She thought of her brother again, thought of the hospital room, thought of the promise, and thought of how he would look at her now. Would he see strength, or would he see someone slipping further into the same shadows that had almost swallowed him? Her throat tightened. She closed her eyes, leaning back against the sandbags, breathing slow. Then footsteps. She opened her eyes, the soldier, the same one, the doubter. He stopped a few feet away, helmet tucked under his arm, face tired. He didn't smirk this time, didn't question. He just stood there quiet. Finally he said, "You saved us twice." She didn't answer. He shifted, uneasy. "I shouldn't have what I said before, about you not being cut out for this." Still she stayed silent. Because what was there to say? His doubt had been his. His words hadn't changed her, his belief would either. But then his voice softened, almost breaking. "I thought this was just another deployment. I thought we'd all make it back." His eyes dropped. "But I watched a friend die today, and I didn't even know what to say to him before it happened." The silence stretched between them, heavy, real. Finally she spoke, her voice low, even. "You don't get to choose the words. Not always. Sometimes the last thing you say is nothing at all." He swallowed hard, looked at her, nodded once. Then he left. And she sat there, staring at the stars, wondering if she had been speaking to him or to herself. The next morning, orders came down. Another mission, another village, another stretch of hostile ground waiting to swallow them whole. Some groaned, some cursed, some stared at their boots. She just listened. Because she knew what the others didn't. Or maybe they did and just tried to forget. The war didn't pause, didn't rest, didn't wait for grief to heal. It simply moved, and they moved with it. But in her chest something else stirred, a shadow she carried alone. Because this mission was close, too close, to a place she knew, a place tied to the promise she had made. She didn't tell them that, not yet. She only shouldered her pack, slung her rifle, and stepped into the heat. Silence following her, like it always did. Why did her heart falter the moment she saw the map? The commander's voice droned on, briefing the team in clipped sentences, but her eyes weren't on him. They were on the red circle drawn over the paper. A village, half buried in the desert, marked as high risk. The name hit her like a blow, a name she hadn't heard aloud in years. Her throat tightened. She kept her face still, her posture rigid. No one could see the shift inside her, not here, not now. The soldier who had once doubted her, he sat across the table, glancing up from his notes. His gaze caught hers for just a second, as if he sensed something. But he didn't ask. And she wouldn't tell. Not yet. The convoy rolled again, engines grinding, sandstorms trailing. Soldiers slumped in their seats, heads bobbing with the rhythm of the road. Some tried to sleep. Some muttered about the mission. Some just stared at nothing. She sat in silence, eyes fixed on the horizon, the name of the village echoing in her mind. Because she had been there once, long before the uniform, before the rifle, before the scars. It was a memory she had buried deep, but the desert had a way of unearthing what you thought was gone. Her brother had been with her then, not as a soldier, just a boy, younger, still full of fire. They had driven through that very place on their way to a larger city. It had been nothing more than a stop, a place to buy bread, water, fuel. But something had happened there, something that never left her. She saw it now through the blur of the desert. A child barefoot standing near a wall, wide-eyed, silent, holding something in his small hands. A ball, a toy, she couldn't remember. All she remembered was the stillness, the eyes, and the sound that followed. The blast. Her brother had pulled her down, shielded her with his body. They had survived, barely. Others hadn't. The memory blurred after that. Screams, dust, soldiers shouting in a language she didn't yet understand, her heart pounding so hard she thought it would burst. And that child, that image, burned into her. It was the first time she had tasted the silence after death. And it was the silence that had never left her since. Now, years later, she was returning, not by chance this time, by orders, by fate. Her grip tightened on the rifle across her lap. The soldier across from her shifted. He had been watching her again, his brow furrowed like he wanted to ask, but he didn't. Instead, he muttered to no one in particular, "Feels like we're driving straight into a trap." No one answered, because they all felt it. By dusk, the convoy reached the outskirts. The village lay quiet, half swallowed by dunes. Mud walls cracked, roofs sagging, windows gaping like hollow eyes. No movement, no smoke from fires, no voices. Too quiet. The convoy halted, engines idled low, dust settled heavy. Orders came, dismount, secure perimeter. They spread out, boots crunching on gravel, weapons raised, eyes sharp. She took position on a collapsed wall, scanning through her scope. Buildings empty, alleys deserted, doors hanging open like broken mouths. Her chest tightened, the same street, the same wall, the same silence. She steadied her breath. The radio crackled. Alpha team moving in. Bravo cover south. Rays, overwatch on the ridge. She moved without hesitation, climbing rubble, finding height, setting her scope. But inside, the tremor returned, the same tremor that only came in quiet. She forced it down, focused on glass and crosshairs, on angles and lines. Not on the past. Not yet. Hours passed, darkness settled. The village stayed still, too still. Soldiers searched houses, finding nothing but dust and abandonment. Radios whispered updates. Tension thickened. Then movement. Her scope caught it, a figure darting across a rooftop, then another, then three more. Her throat tightened. Contact north side. Multiple hostiles, rooftop positions, she called. The village erupted. Gunfire split the night, muzzles flashing from windows and roofs. Shouts, orders, chaos. She locked in, her rifle cracked, one hostile down, another. But for everyone that fell, two more emerged. The street below filled with noise, bullets sparking against walls, soldiers diving for cover. And in the middle of it, the soldier, the doubter, was pinned behind a broken cart, rounds hammering the stone inches from his head. Her scope locked onto the shooter, targeting him. She fired. The man collapsed. The soldier scrambled, breath ragged, eyes wide. He glanced up toward her ridge. Their eyes didn't meet through the scope, but she knew he felt it. He knew she was there. The fight dragged on. Minutes felt like hours. The air filled with smoke, screams, the deafening rhythm of war. And then a blast. An RPG streaked from a rooftop, smashing into the side of a vehicle. The explosion rocked the ground. Fire swallowed steel. Shrapnel tore through the night. She flinched, ears ringing, vision blurring, but she forced herself steady, found the rooftop, found the man reloading. Her shot dropped him. But it was too late for the men in the vehicle. Their screams cut the night. She clenched her jaw, heart pounding, eyes burning. And suddenly she saw it again. Not the man on the rooftop, not the fire, not the screams. The child, the barefoot boy, standing near the wall. The past and present folding together. Her hands trembled. She lowered the rifle, breath breaking. For a moment she wasn't here. She was there, years ago, with her brother pulling her down, shielding her from the blast. Her throat burned, her eyes stung. But then her radio crackled, a voice urgent. "Rays, we're pinned down, we need you now." Her head snapped back, the present surged in. She steadied her grip, raised her rifle, forced her breath calm. and the tremor stopped. She became stone again. By dawn, the village was theirs. If theirs meant ruins, blood, silence. Bodies lay still. Smoke curled from broken walls. The survivors moved among the wreckage, eyes hollow, shoulders heavy. She descended from the ridge, boots crunching on rubble, rifle heavy on her back. No one cheered, no one spoke. They just walked, one step at a time, carrying the weight. And as she passed the burned-out vehicle, she froze. On the ground, half buried in dust, lay something small. A toy scorched broken, a ball melted on one side. Her breath caught, her throat closed. She crouched, staring at it, hand hovering but not touching. The soldier, the one who had doubted her, approached, stopped when he saw her. He looked at the toy, then at her. His mouth opened like he wanted to ask, but he didn't. Instead, he knelt, picked it up, and set it gently on the wall. No words. Just silence. And in that silence, she felt something shift. Not forgiveness, not healing, but a recognition that some silences were shared, even if no one spoke them aloud. As the sun rose over the wreckage, orders came. Another mission, another road. The war didn't pause, didn't care. But she knew, with a quiet certainty, that this wasn't just a mission for her anymore. This was a return, a reckoning. The desert had brought her back to the place it all began. And it wasn't done with her yet. Not until she faced the silence she had been running from all along. Why did she wake in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, when the camp was quiet? The base around her slept. Generators hummed low, a distant dog barked beyond the wire, and somewhere boots crunched as a sentry paced his watch. But inside her tent she sat upright, breath ragged, hands trembling, eyes wide. The dream lingered like smoke. The blast, the child, her brother's hand pulling her down, his voice telling her she didn't have to carry it. But she carried it anyway, every mission, every shot, every silence. She pressed her palms against her face, willing her heart to steady, but it didn't, not right away. It never did. Morning came hard, orders briefed. Another sweep, deeper this time. Intel suggested weapons caches hidden in the village outskirts, pockets of resistance still moving. The men looked tired. Some moved on autopilot, strapping gear, checking rifles, muttering curses under their breath. She moved quietly among them, packing her own kit, methodical. The soldier, the one who once doubted her, caught her eye. He didn't smirk anymore, didn't question. He just gave a small nod. She returned it, almost imperceptibly. It was enough. But inside, the unease grew heavier, because she knew this ground. She knew the silence that lived here, and she knew that silence never came without cost. They moved out at dawn. Sandstorm winds rising, biting against their faces, stinging eyes and skin. The desert didn't want them there. It never did. She walked point with the small forward team, scanning ridges, ruins, rooftops. The silence pressed on them, thicker than the dust. Her radio crackled once, twice, then static. Too much static. She adjusted her earpiece, checked the dial, but the signal barely broke through. Interference, someone muttered. Her stomach tightened. She knew better. This wasn't weather. It was them. The first shot came from nowhere. A crack that split the silence, followed by the hiss of a round ricocheting off stone. Contact. Soldiers dove. Dust exploded around them. Bullets poured from the ruins, muzzle flashes sparking like lightning. She dropped flat, rifle to shoulder, scanning. Found one, fired, found another, fired. The battle surged, raw and brutal. No formation, no rhythm, just survival. She rolled behind a collapsed wall, heart pounding, dust choking her lungs. The soldier landed beside her, weapon shaking in his grip, his face pale. "Where are they?" he gasped. She steadied her scope. "Everywhere." He cursed, voice cracking. "We're boxed in." Her finger tightened on the trigger. Another hostile fell, Another flash vanished. But he was right, they were trapped. Minutes stretched into an eternity, ammunition dwindled, smoke thickened, screams echoed off broken stone. And then she heard it, a sound that cut sharper than any bullet. A child crying. Her blood froze. The sound came from deeper in the ruins, faint, desperate. She swallowed hard, trying to push it away to focus on the fight. But she couldn't. Because it was the same sound she had heard years ago, the sound that never left her. Her hands trembled on the rifle, her breath faltered. The soldier beside her glanced over, frowning. "What is it?" She didn't answer. She couldn't. The radio crackled, the commander's voice strained. "Raise, we need overwatch now, southern flanks collapsing." She closed her eyes, forced her breath steady, forced her finger back on the trigger. The crying still echoed. But she fired again, until the southern flank held. Until the ruins fell silent once more. Except for that cry. After, when the smoke cleared and the hostiles scattered, the squad regrouped, dusty, bloody, exhausted. She stayed behind, slipping through the ruins, drawn toward the sound she couldn't forget. And there, half hidden in shadow, she found him. A boy, barefoot, small, eyes wide with fear. Her breath caught. For a heartbeat the years folded away. She saw the boy from before, the blast, the silence, her brother pulling her down. But this boy was real, now shaking, clutching a piece of cloth in his small hands. She lowered her rifle, slowly, carefully. "It's okay," she whispered, though the words felt fragile. "You're okay." He didn't move, didn't speak, just stared at her with eyes too old for his face. Behind her, boots crunched, the soldier. He stopped when he saw the boy. "Jesus," he muttered, "he's just a kid." She nodded, throat tight. The soldier shifted uneasily. "We can't take him. Orders are clear. Civilians get turned over to local forces." Her jaw clenched. "He won't survive that." He met her eyes. "That's not our call." The silence stretched, heavy. Finally she stood. She didn't argue, didn't fight. But when she turned, the boy reached out, just for a second, his fingers brushing her glove. She froze. Then he let go. And in that touch, she felt the weight of every silence she carried. Back at camp, the men slumped into cots, stripped gear, washed dust from their skin. The soldier lingered near her tent but said nothing. She sat alone again, staring at her rifle, at her trembling hands. She thought of the boy, of his eyes, of his silence. And she thought of her brother, in the hospital bed, telling her she didn't have to carry it. But she did. Because no one else would. Because if she didn't, then what had all the silence been for? The next morning the commander briefed them again, voice hard, eyes cold. "Intel suggests civilian cooperation with hostile forces in that sector. Any contact is to be treated with caution. No exceptions." Her chest tightened. The boy's face flashed in her mind, his hand brushing her glove. Her jaw locked. No exceptions. But deep down she knew. There would always be one. That night she lay awake again, listening to the hum of the generators, the distant bark of dogs, the restless shuffle of soldiers trying to sleep. Her eyes burned, her chest ached. And when the soldier passed her tent, pausing just a moment, she whispered into the dark, "I can't keep doing this." No one heard. Except herself. But dawn would come again, orders would come again. And she would shoulder her rifle. And the silence would follow. Like it always did. The desert was changing. Each morning she woke, it felt heavier, as though the dust itself pressed on her lungs, making each breath an effort. The men joked about the heat, cursed about the sand in their boots, but she noticed something deeper, a fatigue that seeped into the way they carried themselves, into the way silence lingered after orders. And within that silence, her own battles grew sharper. The boy's face haunted her. The touch of his hand lingered like a scar she couldn't wash away. She told no one, carried it alone, just as she carried everything else. But the weight was growing unbearable. A week later, orders came again. This time, escort a supply convoy through hostile territory. A simple run, the commander called it. Nothing simple existed out there. She adjusted her gear, checking every strap, every round, every blade. Routine, automatic. The soldier noticed her focus and gave another nod. He didn't mock anymore, didn't question. He only followed her lead now, silently, as though some unspoken truth had passed between them in the ruins. But his silence carried its own weight. The convoy rolled out at dawn. Engines roared, armored trucks kicking up clouds of dust that swallowed the horizon. She sat in the lead vehicle, rifle across her lap, eyes scanning endless sand. It was quiet, too quiet. The kind of quiet that told her the desert was waiting. Halfway through, the road narrowed between jagged rock formations. Natural choke point, too convenient. Her gut twisted. She tapped the driver's shoulder, told him to slow. He glanced at her, uncertain. Orders are to push through. She shook her head. It's wrong. The radio crackled. The commander's voice. Convoy, maintain speed. Repeat, maintain speed. The driver tightened his grip on the wheel. Obey orders or listen to her. The decision was stolen. The first explosion ripped through the lead truck, a blast of fire and steel that shook the ground. Chaos erupted. Shouts, gunfire, smoke, flames. The convoy scattered, vehicles swerving, soldiers diving for cover. She was already moving, yanking the soldier down behind twisted metal as rounds rained down from the ridges. Ambush perfectly laid, perfectly timed. And she had felt it coming. They fought viciously, pinned in from both sides. Every shot echoed, every scream cut through the smoke. She pressed against cover, returning fire, movements sharp and precise. The soldier clung close, reloading clumsily, fear written on his face. She steadied him with a sharp look. Breathe, she ordered. Aim, fire. He obeyed, his shots steadier now, his panic thinning. But still they were outnumbered, outgunned. And then she saw it, movement on the ridge. A shadow darting, small, quick. Not a fighter. A child. Her breath caught. Her scope locked for a heartbeat, and the world slowed. The boy's face, the same eyes. Her hands trembled. Was it him? She blinked and the shadow vanished. Gunfire pulled her back. Dust and blood swallowed the thought. But doubt stayed, sharp and cruel. Hours dragged. Reinforcements finally arrived, pushing the attackers back. The convoy limped to safety, scorched and broken. Inside camp, chaos turned to aftermath. Medics shouting, engines groaning, men lying silent beneath tarps. She sat alone on an ammo crate, helmet in her lap, sweat dripping down her face. Her commander stormed past, fury in his eyes. You should have pushed through faster. Her head snapped up. With respect, sir, we would all be dead if we had. His glare burned, but he said nothing more. He turned, barking orders at others. She exhaled slowly, hands shaking. The soldier approached, hesitated, then sat beside her. You knew, he said quietly. You felt it before it happened. She didn't look at him. I've seen it before. He studied her, voice low. That's not something you just see, that's something you carry. Silence. Finally she whispered, it never leaves. He didn't press, didn't ask. He just nodded, and for once the silence felt like understanding. That night she dreamed again. The ruins, the blast, the boy's cry. But this time the dream shifted. She stood in the desert alone, surrounded by endless silence. In her hands, a rifle that turned to dust. At her feet, footprints, small, fragile, leading away into the horizon. She tried to follow, but the sand swallowed her steps. The footprints vanished. And the silence crushed her until she woke, choking on air, tears burning her eyes. Morning came cold, though the desert sun blazed. Orders again: sweep the nearby villages for weapons caches. No exceptions, no hesitation. She shouldered her gear, her body obeyed, her mind resisted. Because she knew what those words meant. No exceptions. And she knew what exceptions she already carried. The squad moved out, houses searched, families displaced, silence in every corner broken only by shouts and boots and fear. She entered one small house, weapon raised, scanning every shadow. Inside, a woman clutched a child, eyes wide with terror. Her rifle lowered. The soldier moved past her, sharp, efficient, tearing through cupboards, lifting mats, searching. His face hardened, almost mechanical. He glanced back at her, saw her hesitation. "Don't," he said firmly. "Not here, not now." She swallowed, forcing her weapon steady again. But the child's eyes stayed on her, silent, wide, familiar. Her chest ached. By dusk the sweep ended, weapons found, villages scarred, another day written into the silence. Back at camp, she cleaned her rifle in the fading light. Each stroke of the cloth felt heavier, as though she scrubbed at something deeper than dust. The soldier sat nearby, quiet, watching. Finally he spoke. "One day this will break you." She didn't look up. "It already has." He fell silent. And so did she. That night she wrote in her notebook. Not reports, not mission logs, just words, fragments, memories, things she could never say aloud. Her brother's voice. The child's cry. The silence. She wrote until her hand cramped, until the ink smudged with tears she hadn't noticed. Then she closed the book, hid it away, and lay in the dark, waiting for dawn. Because dawn always came. And so did the silence. Why did her hands tremble before every mission? She never showed it, never let the men see. But when the straps clicked shut, when the rifle settled into place, there was always that moment, just one breath, where her hands betrayed her. It wasn't fear of death. That part she had made peace with long ago. It was fear of choice. Because out here, survival was measured not only in bullets fired, but in the weight of what you chose to do or not to do. And the silence after those choices, it always came back. The new orders came before dawn. She was summoned to the briefing tent, the desert air still cold, lanterns swaying. The commander stood tall, his voice clipped. "We've received intelligence on a high-value insurgent leader. Confirmed sighting in the northern sector. Task Force Alpha will intercept. Secondary units will secure the perimeter." Maps were unrolled, lines drawn. It was precise, clean. But war never was. She scanned the photos, the grainy satellite images, mud brick compounds, narrow alleys, civilian footprints everywhere. And among those images, one small courtyard with scattered toys, a plastic ball, a rusted bicycle. Her throat tightened. Outside the tent, the soldier caught up with her. "You don't like it," he said quietly. She kept walking. "I don't have to like it, I have to follow it." But he stepped in front of her, forcing her to meet his eyes. "This isn't just another mission, is it?" She looked away. "They never are." Hours later, the unit moved out. Night cloaked the desert, stars stretched endless above. The convoy lights cut narrow beams across the sand, each vehicle a heartbeat in the dark. Inside her truck, silence pressed down. She adjusted her rifle, checked her optics, anything to keep her mind from replaying the image of that courtyard. The soldier sat across from her, helmet tilted back, watching. He didn't speak. Didn't need to. His silence carried questions she wasn't ready to answer. They reached the outskirts before dawn. The village slept, shadows deep against clay walls. Dogs barked, then fell silent. The commander gave the signal. "Move in, fast and hard." Boots hit the ground, doors kicked open, shouts in the night. She led her team down a narrow street, heart pounding. The air smelled of dust, smoke, fear. Every corner held a shadow, every doorway a possibility. And then movement. A figure darted across an alley, rifle glinting in the pale light. She raised her scope, breath steady. Crosshairs found the target. But then she froze, because just behind him, bare feet, small, running. Her chest clenched, the child. She shifted aim, squeezed trigger, one shot. The fighter dropped. The child stumbled, fell, then scrambled into the shadows. Her hands shook. The men surged forward, shouting, clearing rooms, securing ground. But her eyes stayed fixed on where the child had vanished. Minutes stretched into an hour. Resistance was heavy. Gunfire rattled through the village, sharp bursts that echoed like thunder. At last the radio crackled, target secured, package confirmed. The men cheered, relief surged. But not for her. Because in her mind, she still saw those bare feet disappearing into the dark. They regrouped outside, prisoners blindfolded, hands bound. The commander's face was grim but triumphant. She stood apart, rifle heavy in her hands. Dust clung to her lips, sweat stung her eyes. And inside her chest, an ache she couldn't name. The soldier approached, his face drawn. "You saved that kid." Her jaw tightened, for now. He frowned. "What do you mean?" She looked out across the desert, voice low. "Tomorrow, another raid, another firefight, another courtyard. We keep calling it victories, but for them it's just another scar." He said nothing, couldn't. Back at camp, celebration filled the air. Radios buzzed with commendations. Men laughed, slapped backs, counted another mission survived. But she slipped away. To the edge of camp, to the silence. She pulled out her notebook, wrote by moonlight. The child lived today. But I wonder, what life did I leave him to? The words blurred as tears touched the page. She closed the book, held it tight. And for the first time in weeks, she whispered aloud, so soft it barely reached the night. "I'm sorry." The next morning, the commander called her in, his expression unreadable. "You disobeyed direct orders yesterday." Her stomach dropped. "Sir, He cut her off. "You delayed fire. I reviewed the helmet footage." Her breath caught, heat rose in her chest. "I neutralized the target," she said firmly. "Yes," his eyes narrowed, "but you hesitated." Silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Finally he leaned closer. "Do not let it happen again. Do you understand?" Her jaw clenched. "Yes, sir." But inside, another voice whispered, "What if I already did?" That night she couldn't sleep. The camp buzzed with routine, but her mind was a battlefield of its own. She walked the perimeter, boots crunching in sand. The soldier joined her silently. They stood together under the stars. "You ever think about after?" he asked suddenly. She frowned. "After what?" "All of this, war, missions, the silence." She hesitated. The question felt dangerous. Finally she whispered, "I don't think I'll ever have an after." He looked at her, pain flickering in his eyes. "That's not true." But she turned away. Because deep down she wasn't sure. The desert wind howled that night, rattling tents, carrying whispers across the sand. She lay awake, listening, her rifle beside her. And somewhere beyond the campfires, in the shadows of ruined villages, she imagined small footsteps. Running, always running. And she wondered if she had saved anyone at all. Or only delayed the silence. Why did the camp feel quieter tonight? It wasn't just the wind or the engines cooling after long patrols. It was something else. A heaviness in the air, as though even the desert itself was holding its breath. She sat alone at the edge of the perimeter, back against a crate, rifle propped nearby. The notebook rested on her knees, blank page waiting, pen trembling in her hand. But the words wouldn't come. Because tonight the silence pressed too hard. The mission briefing was short, too short. Insurgent cells regrouping east of Sector 9. They've begun targeting supply lines. We'll cut them off at the source." The commander's voice was sharp, efficient, no hesitation. But when the map unrolled, she saw it instantly. Not a stronghold, not a camp. A village. Her gut twisted. She recognized the outline of alleys, the scatter of mud brick homes, families, children, lives that would be broken open by the time the sun set. And yet orders were orders. She stared at the map until her vision blurred, until the voices in the tent felt distant, until only one thought remained. How many more courtyards? How many more shadows running barefoot into the dark? That night the soldier found her again. He always did, as if drawn to the weight she carried. "You saw it, didn't you?" he asked quietly. She didn't answer, didn't need to. He lowered his voice further. "This one's different." Finally she looked up. The firelight caught the strain in her eyes. "They say cut them off at the source, but I've been there. I know that place. The only source we'll find is people trying to survive." He swallowed, torn. "Then why go?" Her laugh was bitter, hollow, "Because we don't get to choose." He stepped closer. "Maybe we do." She froze, staring at him. His words were dangerous, reckless, but they stirred something she had buried deep, hope or maybe madness. Either way, it scared her more than the silence. They rolled out at dawn. Engines growled, weapons checked, tension heavy. The desert stretched endless before them, but she couldn't shake the image of the map, couldn't silence the echo of his words. "Maybe we do." By the time they reached the outskirts, her hands shook so badly she had to steady them against her rifle. The village lay ahead, still and fragile in the morning light. Smoke rose from cooking fires, children's laughter faint on the breeze. Her chest tightened. The commander's order came sharp through the radio: "Sweep every building, no exceptions." Her squad moved forward, boots struck dust, weapons raised. And she hesitated. The first door splintered open, shouts in the local tongue. A family dragged out, terrified, pleading. Her heart pounded, her vision blurred. Because she saw it again: the courtyard, the ball, the bicycle. And then bare feet, darting across the alley. She spun, rifle snapping up. A child froze in her sights. Her finger trembled on the trigger. The world narrowed to the sound of her breath, to the pounding of her heart, to the weight of every choice she had ever made. Behind her the commander's voice thundered, "Do it." She didn't move. "Soldier." Her jaw locked, tears burned her eyes. She lowered the rifle. "Negative," she said, voice breaking but firm. "He's unarmed." The silence that followed was worse than any explosion. The commander's fury burned hot, his voice cutting like a blade. "You disobeyed a direct order." But before she could answer, the soldier stepped forward. "She's right, he's a kid." Her eyes snapped to him, shock, gratitude, fear. The commander's face twisted with rage. "Both of you stand down." But it was too late. Because the men had seen. And for the first time, someone else had spoken the truth aloud. The sweep ended in chaos. Some soldiers grumbled, others kept silent, but the fractures were visible now, cracks running through the squad. Back at camp, she was summoned immediately. The commander's office was dim, lantern light flickering against maps and medals. His voice was low, venomous. "You humiliated me in front of my men." Her spine straightened. "I did my duty, I protected an innocent." "You disobeyed." His fist slammed the table, "and that hesitation will get people killed." Her voice wavered, but she didn't back down. "Maybe hesitation is the only thing keeping us human." Silence, heavy, dangerous. Finally he leaned close, eyes cold. "You think this war cares about your humanity? Out here there's no right or wrong, only survival. Remember that, or you won't survive either." She met his glare, unflinching. Maybe survival isn't the only thing worth fighting for. For a moment they just stared, two forces locked in quiet war. Then he dismissed her with a wave. Get out of my sight." Outside, the soldier waited, his eyes searched hers. What happened? She shook her head, couldn't speak. Instead, she walked past him, to the edge of camp, where the desert stretched endless and merciless. Her hands trembled as she pulled out her notebook. This time the words poured out, sharp and raw. They say survival is everything. But what is survival if it costs your soul? How many times can I lower my weapon before I'm the enemy instead? The pen dug into the page, carving truth into silence. And when she stopped, she realized her hands had stilled. For the first time in weeks, they didn't tremble. That night, the soldier found her again. "You stood your ground," he said softly. She looked at him, exhaustion etched deep into her face. "For how long, though? How many more times before they take my rifle or my life?" He hesitated, then whispered, "Then maybe we don't wait for them to decide." Her breath caught. "What are you saying?" His eyes held hers steady. "I'm saying maybe we make our own choices, even if it costs us everything." The silence stretched, thick with danger. But within it, she felt something she hadn't in a long time. Not hope, not yet, but the possibility of it. She lay awake long into the night, staring at the canvas ceiling of her tent. The commander's words echoed. The soldier's words lingered. The child's eyes haunted. And in the space between all of them, she heard her brother's voice again. Dignity doesn't shout, it doesn't argue, it simply acts. Her chest ached. Because she knew now. The moment was coming. A choice she couldn't escape. And when it came, she would not lower her weapon. She would lower her silence. She sat in silence, the desert wind whispering against the burned edges of her sleeve. The mission was over. At least that's what command would call it. Successful, completed, tactically sound. Numbers written into a report, but for her it was something else entirely. The sun was low, bleeding orange and red across the horizon, as if the sky itself carried the scars of what they had done. Around her, the unit packed gear, speaking in low tones. Some laughed too loudly, too quickly, like they needed the sound to drown out what sat in their chests. Others moved with their heads down, mechanical, avoiding her eyes, avoiding their own reflections. She didn't speak, she didn't need to. The silence was heavier than gunfire. One of the younger soldiers, Tors, barely 23, sat a few feet away, fiddling with his broken watch. He looked up at her once, opened his mouth as if to say something, then closed it again. Instead, he muttered to himself, shaking his head. His hands trembled, not from the cold, but from what memory had lodged there. She didn't reach out. She knew sometimes silence was the only comfort that didn't feel like a lie. A medic walked past her, his boots crunching on the gravel. "You should get that arm checked," he said softly, nodding at the charred sleeve. She only gave the smallest of nods. "Later, maybe." Her gaze drifted beyond the camp. The wreck of the village they'd crossed through still lingered in her vision. The faces, the shadows, the emptiness left behind. She thought of the woman at the doorway, the one who didn't move, who only watched. There had been no anger in her eyes, no blame, just a kind of knowing. A silent acknowledgement that war had passed through and stolen what it wanted, and all that was left was endurance. She understood that look. She carried it herself. Command's drone would arrive soon to pull them out. Extraction always felt the same, too clean, too abrupt, like being lifted out of a nightmare before you'd fully processed it. You left with dirt under your nails, blood in your thoughts, and they expected you to step back into air-conditioned quiet like nothing happened. But something had happened, something always did. Across the clearing, Davis stood with his rifle slung, speaking with the team lead. He was laughing, that same laugh that grated on her the first day when he dismissed her presence when he thought respect was optional. She remembered how he looked at her then, condescending, careless. And now, his eyes flicked toward her and something had shifted. Not admiration, not even understanding, but recognition. A quiet acknowledgement that whatever line he thought divided them had been erased, by what they had walked through together. That was enough. The drone descended, engines cutting the silence with a roar. Dust swirled, stinging her face, filling her lungs with grit. One by one, they climbed aboard. The weight of their packs seemed lighter than the weight of their silence. Inside, the hum of the engines became a lullaby of exhaustion. Some closed their eyes instantly, pretending sleep could wash away memory. She sat by the window, watching the land shrink beneath them. Her reflection looked back, tired, older, eyes that had seen too much. She didn't flinch from it. For a long while no one spoke. Then Torres whispered almost to himself, "We made it." His words hung there, fragile, unsure if they were true. She turned her head slightly, her voice quiet, steady. "We did." And that was all. The drone carried them away, across deserts, across silence, toward another base, another mission, another story that would never be told the way it was lived. But inside her something settled, a truth she had always carried but never spoken. Respect was not something given, not in words, not in titles. It was carved in silence, in endurance, in action. As the drone cut through the twilight sky, she let her eyes close. The hum pressed against her thoughts, and in the quiet of her mind a line formed, simple, sharp, undeniable. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. And the world remembers in silence.